what I'd like people to think about that is I'd like people to think that NCID really wrote a significant chapter in the economic development history of the state.
So speaking of history, 10 plus years you've been, or I guess it's almost 10 years, 9 years, you've been at NCID, but you've been in the entrepreneurship world for a really long time.
Mm-hmm.
How has it changed? Now I know I'm not going to give you the softball because I know we already talked about the diversity. So I know that's changed dramatically. Aside from that, which again is great, don't get me wrong, but how has it changed? How have founders changed? We talked about how money has changed a little bit, but just generally speaking, how's the ecosystem changed? Is it easier? Is it harder? Was it the golden years? Is it now the golden years?
I think now is the golden years. And I think it's getting more golden with AI. Take this with a grain of salt. I'm old. I'm way older than both of you.
Gary's really old. I don't know if that's true.
I will be 59 in a couple months.
Gary just turned 50. I have to tell you that.
Yeah.
He looks 30 and it makes me disgusted. But anyway, go ahead.
By the time I hit my 10-year anniversary here, I'll be turning 60 in this job. And so I like to answer this question by giving you an example of my own entrepreneurial career. So back in one of my startups, we were just there at the beginning of the internet age. We were helping companies get online. We were helping them figure out a strategy, right? And what was this new medium going to do for business? And we had a marquee Fortune 500 client. They sell paint. Their initials are Sherwin-Williams.
Mm-hmm.
And small company. And I remember because we were this boutique agency / marketing agency / software development company that was like a new thing back then. The first commerce-enabled website we built for them was 7 figures.
Oh, I knew that client.
For functionality, keep in mind, this was for functionality that you can with a credit card on GoDaddy right? Because there weren't shopping carts built back then.
Sure. Oh, you had to do it all from scratch.
We were doing kernel level development on NT operating systems to like building by hand shopping carts. So
I remember those days.
Is it harder or easier? Oh my God. You needed to, like what we had to do back in the day, I had to put my signature on a $2.5 million personally guaranteed line of credit because you had to invest a ton of money to just get to an MVP.
Sure. Yeah. You had to buy the boxes and put them in your office and get the internet and all that. Yeah.
There was no Amazon Web Services then, right? Like,
nope.
You could just, so to me, it's never been easier, right?
Yeah.
Like to go to market. Now, here's where it's harder because of that. And I just had this conversation with one of our founders just last week. Getting to market validation when the noise level has gone up exponentially.
Sure.
So as it's gotten easier to get out into the market, the volume has gone to 11,000 on a 1 to 10 scale. So that's where the people that are really going to break out now, that's the nuts they have to crack and figure that out. But here too, like you could never think about selling to the long tail because it was inefficient. You can now start with the longest end of the tail and find your first earliest adopters on some niche interest, and you can start a base there and you can work backwards up to the body of the animal. That is a cool paradigm shift. And the technology now enables you to do that and to have efficiencies that us old timers only dreamed of back in the day. And it's funny because again, it's historically, right? One of our partners at that company was this little tech company I referred to earlier called Microsoft. And they almost missed the internet, right? And as they started dabbling in it, I was one of the first to get a Microsoft certification in internet sales. My certification number was 2 digits.
Oh, wow.
Whoa. Because this was an emerging field.
Yeah, you talk about early good adopter.
And they were looking for case studies, right? And I found this doctor practice that they let us guinea pig with them and put this practice up online. And that was our case study that got me in and admitted into the internet sales program that gave me I think it was like a 72 or 68 was something like that. And so if you ride those waves, you get to be there. And finally, that's what AI, I just said this to some colleagues in a meeting earlier today. I think we were talking about AI. We're planning our big annual summit and we're talking about the agenda. And I said, I wish I was 30 years younger. And I looked at all of them and I said, I don't even know why you guys are still working here right now. With AI out there, you should all be starting on startups right now because the tools are really there. The resources are there. It's never been easier to plug in. People ask me always, oh, what's your greatest advice for entrepreneurs? And I tell them, especially in the state of North Carolina, plug in. There is so much people, organizations, resources, funds that are here. If you can't figure out an entry point to the ecosystem here, I would tell you do something else because it's here. And if you can't figure that out, I'm not sure how successful you're going to be as a founder.
Boy, that's true.
That sounds dickish, I know, and I apologize, but
you got to draw the line somewhere. Now, if you can't succeed in this market, I mean, it's as easy as it's ever going to be, for sure.
It's my opinion, but subject to change. Everything's in flux right now.
That's for sure. Go ahead, Gary.
So you mentioned that right now is the golden age, and you seem pretty excited about what AI is going to be able to do for founders and startups. So I was curious, now you don't have to give me specifics or details or name any names, but have you come across any ideas or new industries that kind of are exciting to you that you can see are going to build into something in the future that you probably weren't expecting?
Yeah, I think some of the AI use cases are pretty obvious. And frankly, I think they're already getting saturated. And that's mostly the generative stuff. What I get excited about is the kind of product development areas that AI can now emulate in really unique ways we haven't thought about. So like plant science. And again, I'll mention ag tech again, right? Like where you can use optical scanners and AI to detect a disease in large cash crops and cut your need for fertilizer and pesticides like by 97%. That kind of stuff, it might not be sexy, but it's huge on the impact, better for the environment, higher yields, lower cost margins, things like that. I remember we funded and helped this School of Science and Math kids, or Hogwarts as I refer to it. These kids are so darn bright over there. They did one of their startup weekends. And I don't know about you, when you were in high school, I had a landscaping business with my best friend, Rob, which, as a couple 17-year-olds running a $100,000 business was more than legit, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Here I am at this weekend seeing what these kids came up with. And one of the startups was they were using AI to do higher tumor detection level in brain scans. And they had a parent that was connected to, I think, the Mayo Clinic, so had several gigabytes of scans that they could train the AI on. And then
Is crazy.
Isn't that crazy?
That's
right?
Awesome.
And what high schooler even thinks that big? Like, you normally got the bar apps, right? High school, that's crazy.
Yeah. But there's similar stuff happening in robotics and all that kind of stuff. So that's that. And then the no code solutions now, right? I was a mainframe programmer, so I don't consider myself a coder at all, but I'm getting ready to dust off the old keyboard here. That might be like in retirement that I might
do some vibe coding.
I was just going to say, you could teach Tom how to vibe code.
Could get some vibe code. So I had this hypothesis that I've stolen from Eric Boggs. He says that V1s are going to be way more common, but V2s are going to be much, much harder. What do you think about that one?
I would tend to agree. And curiously, we just interviewed Eric recently as well, because
he's one of my favorite people around here.
Yeah. He was we had funded Eric twice through a seed grant. And also a perfect example, sorry to go back to the question, but like, why are ecosystems so awesome? That dude has such rich experience, such valuable experience, and he'll share it with anybody. He'll sit down and talk. And he talked about his first one that, when he got pushed out of the company that he started by his board, that left, but how it helped him with his next. And I think that was where I was referring to, that it's easier to get in there with your V1, how you're going to differentiate, how you're going to grow, how you're going to break out from the pack. That's going to be the challenge that we see with the future. And again, we'll figure it out. That's the coolest thing about entrepreneurship. It's always evolving, always.
So that leaves me with my final question. Gary's got one more hiding for you, but my last question is, let's jump out 10 years from now. You're celebrating almost your 70th birthday. What does it look like? What does the ecosystem look like? What does NC Ideal look like?
That's an open question because here's an interesting thing that NCID is currently facing. So since COVID, the team and the board stacked hands and said people were hurting. So we have been overspending to help more people. We have been over deploying our capital. And so there is a limit to our funding. And as we overspend just to help people more that need it at the moment, right? For so many people in this nonprofit space, especially in private foundations, they exist to serve themselves, and it really pisses me off. And they think they're entitled to exist into perpetuity. And when things get rough and markets nosedive, they actually pull back and they'll underspend. And then the IRS lets you do what's called an underspend carry forward. So as long as you spend one more dollar the next year than you did the previous, but not the 5% that you're required to by law, they'll let you keep that going on forever. And a lot of foundations use that as a tool. We've been spending at twice the level. As a matter of fact, we have a 4-year overspend carry forward. We have spent so much and deployed so much capital in the last 4 years, we could take 4 years off and not put $1 on the street, and the IRS couldn't touch us for that. So here's why I'm sorry I'm giving you a long answer to this, but
No, it's fine.
But I don't know for a fact that we'll exist 10 years from now, is the weird, kind of brutal answer to that question. And so we're trying to test the market to see if other people find value in what we do. And by other people in halls of power, deep pockets, because our assets are around 50 million, depending upon wherever the markets are tanking at the moment. And that's a rounding error for other foundations that really have the juice to have an impact, right? And we are very good at deploying capital in a very efficient and highly leveraged way. So that's my value prop. So as I'm selling what we can offer is we can put high impact dollars on the street that are done with equity first focus and to strengthen the economy and all the good stuff and smart stuff. We will either figure out a way to have other people to help deploy other people's capital, in which case, yeah, we're still here 10, 20 years from now. What is that? What would I like people to think about that? Is I'd like people to think that the NCID really wrote a significant chapter in the economic development history of the state. And more importantly, and not just limited to North Carolina, we are really trying to set the example of how we need to redefine what economic development means, because it sure as heck isn't anymore, here's $1 billion for Apple to move here. Right? ROI on those deals, it's no long, you can't hide anymore and say, oh, it makes good economic sense. It does not. The receipts are out there if you're willing to look for them. You know, we said at our summit last year, the Secretary of State issued a report that to me was a bombshell, where they surveyed thousands of startups in the state of North Carolina. And their analysis came to the conclusion that if we helped only 5% of the nascent firms in the state of North Carolina get to 100,000 a year in revenue or more, it would create 25,000 additional jobs in the state per year and have a $1.5 to $2 billion economic impact per year one, as opposed to these big incentive giveaways that
for 500 jobs. Yeah.
And get decades to pay back on an ROI standpoint. And again, spoiler alert, they never pan out as promised. But that takes a certain political will and discipline to say, listen, I'm going to plant trees under whose shade I'm never going to sit, and that's okay, right? Because it's going to mean a better tomorrow for those that follow me.
Man, I could talk to you for another hour about that, because I'm working with the chamber to try to create a small business wing of the chamber so that those kinds of things, because the big boys that's what everybody knows and that's what everybody talks about. But there's half the chamber people you don't have a clue of. And we would love to make that better known and better supported. Man, you're right on my level there.
A piece of advice on that quest of yours?
Absolutely.
Because I did a lot of that. I tried to convince a lot of chambers during my time at Kauffman. And it took me a lot of meetings that went nowhere before I figured out the pattern. And I'll spare you that learning curve.
Okay.
Chambers are member associations funded by the dues of the members.
Yep.
If you try to sell them on an entrepreneurship strategy, what you're really saying is, I want to take your dues and I want to help gestate, startups that may someday compete against you.
That's fair. Yeah, that doesn't sound good, does it?
So think about your language and you got to figure out the way to sell that, because like I said, I'm not as smart as you. So it took me dozens of meetings and I've had to do these postmortems. And I'm like, what the hell, man? You guys were all jazzed when we were there. And they're like, we thought you were going to give us money. So now it's like, you want to take the money that our members give us and start a company that might compete against them at some point.
Oh,
Yeah,
100%.
that's a turd in the punch bowls. They're not so bueno about that.
Nice. All right. I will have to craft my language
For
carefully.
what that's worth.
For what that's worth. I
Now,
appreciate
I
it
will
very
tell
much.
you, it is incredible, enlightened self-interest for the chambers that do understand the value of that. And in a more serious note, I can help you construct that narrative too, because it is absolutely for the good of everybody, right?
Yeah,
More
for sure.
startups. It also attracts more of the big companies because nobody does R&D anymore. They just buy it.
That's
Yeah,
right.
So a vibrant entrepreneurial ecosystem is a great corporate attraction and retention component. So people should think about that.
I love it.
I'm assuming now this is going to be a cliche question because you already alluded to that, but we do close out with this for everybody. So what are your top 3 pieces of advice to a new startup or a new entrepreneur?
Okay. I already mentioned plug in, right? No reason that a first time entrepreneur in particular, I will say what many of us with the multiple scars can tell you is it can be a lonely, hard haul. So build your peer group, and that's just simply plugging in. And there are so many opportunities. If nothing else, sign up for our newsletter. We spam you twice a month. It's every other Thursday. And we have a list of all the events at all of our partners. You can find your special interest group. You can find your affinity group and you can get involved. So just do that so that you don't have to do so much alone. That's the first. Second, be coachable. There are people here that are willing to help you. David, you alluded to that, and that's true. It's here to do that. I took a meeting like that with a Haitian immigrant yesterday. And it's baked into our DNA here, but you need to be respectful of that. And the best way I can say that is be coachable, right? So show that you appreciate that you can get that kind of access and at least be open to it. I was at an event 2 weeks ago and it was a big 20 startups pitched, and there were ones that we had funded, some that were in the current cycle, some we said no to. This one that we said no to, she made a beeline for me right after we were at a break and not happy. And we say no to a lot more people than we can say yes
Sure.
to. So it's occupational hazard that I run into people that aren't too happy about NC idea. And I said, well, what'd you think about at least the feedback you got? Was there usefulness to that? And she's like, no, there wasn't, candidly. And then she started explaining to me why. And I just went, oh yeah, that's right. I remember us talking about you. You are completely uncoachable, right?
Oh, man.
So, if you want to go it alone, just adopt that kind of attitude and you will be alone. So be open, have some humility to it. I don't mean you have to kiss anybody's. I just mean
Sure.
be open-minded to it, right? Because you are the easiest person to fool. So hear from other people and be willing to do that. And then I guess if I come up with a third, it's be honest with yourself, understand, to use a formal language, know thyself, right? Is this for you? There's nothing wrong with thinking you want to go do something in the entrepreneurship space and then coming to a conclusion that it's not going to fit. Saturday night, I was at an event, another one of our companies we funded. Love this company, husband-wife team. They've been struggling. And I asked them, I said, so how's it going? And they're like, we've given ourselves this year. Like this year's the breakout year, or we probably need to wind down. And as sad as that would make us all, that if they come to that conclusion, I applaud them that they had the presence of mind
Yeah.
to understand that we didn't start this to just be treading water, to just have barely our nose above the water line, right? When we started this, and it's a cool company that does like something that's got social value in addition to economic value. And it's like, we wanted really to have impact, but on all levels, right? Yeah, social impact, but also financial impact personally. And like they sacrifice a lot, right? And not just monetary, it's time. And so know thyself and have those conversations with you from time to time. Because you can still have a lot of impact for your community with your entrepreneurial mindset, just in other ways. Volunteer. You can show up at the events. You can be one of our reviewers or support other people like you guys are. And so there's ways to engage, but try to figure out which lane you're best at and what's the best fit for you. Because it's hard enough as it is. It's
Sure.
even harder if you're not being honest with yourself.
A friend of mine told me a quote years ago. No one starts a business just to have a job.
That is correct.
And I thought that was so profound. And the more you think about that, the deeper it becomes. But it is so powerful because so many people are just like, I'm going to keep the lights on. And they kill the thing so bad that maybe they end up with debt or something like that. And so to have that presence of mind is unusual and very good. Even it doesn't always work out. And that's not always bad. I think that's another thing. Failure is not always bad. It doesn't feel good, never tastes good, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. And you're probably going to do better the next time because of it.
Add on to your statement there, and that is like when I've seen entrepreneurs that were stuck, I've asked them, like, do you own a company or do you own a job? Because you're making basically what your market rate is if you were working somewhere else, but you're putting in twice the hours. And
your hourly rates
and your
half.
stress level is like through the roof because you got so much at
Can't
stake.
sleep. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Definitely not worth it. Goodness gracious. I could talk to you for all day, but I know you need to go, and I appreciate your time so very much.
I'm
Yeah,
going
this
to
has been
ask.
awesome.
I'm going to ask in closing that you reciprocate and join us on our pod one of these days.
More than happy to.
And then
Absolutely.
we can pick up where we left off.
Sounds great.
Now, Thom, if anybody wants to learn more about you or NC Idea, what's the best way for them to reach out?
ncidea.org. It's got it all there.
That's as easy as it gets right there.
And we will put the links in the show notes for everybody.
Cool. Gentlemen, thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank
And
you,
on
sir.
that note, we are out. We'll be back next week. Thank you, everybody. Have a good one.
See ya.
See ya.
That wraps up this episode of the BizDev Podcast. Thanks for listening. Let us know your thoughts. We'd love to hear from you. Shoot us an email at hello@thebigpixel.net or connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, X, and LinkedIn. BizDev is a production of Big Pixel, a US-based provider of UX, design, strategy, and custom software. This podcast is edited by Matt McCracken, yes, that is his name, and me, Christy Pronto, marketing guru for Big Pixel.